Now we have, I suppose, a brief coffee break, but I think we are still on time, so we have 15 minutes to relax, to interact, to have some networking, and to sip a good Italian coffee. So we will start again. I suppose that with thanks to two nice presentations from our keynote speakers, and we will have also one more presentation from STEM4youth Consortium. After the three presentations, I would like to invite the three speakers to be on the stage in order to be ready to discuss with the audience about the contents of the presentation. But of course, I suppose that also the other members of the consortium presented the modules can be active to respond or comment on their activities of the project. So gender models are definitely relevant to foster STEM education and STEM careers, but what kind of gender role models? All the gender role models are good enough or effective to pursue this kind of objectives, or maybe they can be also counterproductive. We will learn more about this topic thanks to our keynote speakers with Wendy Sadler, and she's Director of Science Made Simpler and lecturer in Science Communication and Engagement at Cardiff University in UK. So Wendy, if you join the stage, present gender role models in STEM, inspiration or truth.
Thank you very much. Buongiorno. Good morning. Good morning. This is my first time in Milan, and look at this room. So beautiful, bellissimo, so good. Thank you for inviting me to this event. It's very exciting to be part of such a great pan-European event, and long may that collaboration continue, will I say. So, I am passionate about encouraging scientists and engineers of the future. I studied physics and music, which is an unusual combination, but why not? And I think we should be trying to get real role models out to see people. So I'll just tell you about a few concerns I have about the use of role models and some research that we've done that tells us a little bit more about role models and how to use them well. So have a think for a moment. Who is your role model? Just think of them in your head if you have one. Maybe you have more than one. And I'll come back to the end and show you who my role model was after we've looked at some of the data. So why is there a problem? You don't need to be told this. In every country, most countries across the world, but particularly European countries, the number of women choosing science and engineering is minimal compared to the proportion of women in that country. So most countries are roughly 50-50. Male, female, but the number of women choosing science or engineering is between 15 and 25% usually. In the UK, we're not even on this list because our figures are so bad that we are not in this top. I think there are 8 countries there. Latvia is the best in terms of women, but still is not very high, only 30%. So this is why there is a problem. Why does it matter? Maybe it just doesn't matter. Well, if we aren't tapping into 50% of the talent, then we're losing a lot of opportunity for science, I think. So one reason might be that there is a shortage of STEM skills, so we need to tap into the other part that isn't being reached, okay? So there is shortage, we need to get more girls because that's where there's more opportunity to fill the gaps. But however, it isn't just an ethical, moral reason. Lots of business reports have shown that when you have diverse teams working on a problem, whether that be a science problem or a business problem, then diverse teams do a better job. They actually help you be a more successful company or a more successful research team. Harvard Business Review did this research and showed that where the boards of companies had gender equality on the board, their profits went up 15%. So this is hard money, right? This is a good reason. And if they had ethnically diverse or racially diverse boards, their profits went up even more, 35%. So yes, it's a moral issue, and we should be doing it, but also there's good hard facts to suggest diversity is better. So what does the research say? This is one of the largest studies that's been done, I think, in Europe, but it's based in the UK, with 7,000 students, and they've been tracking them since the age of 10 years old till they're still doing it now, 17 years old, and trying to work out what happens to their attitude of science. This graph is in the book, in the article in the book, if you need to look at it. It's not very clear there. But basically, before this research, people believed that science at school might be the problem. Perhaps children didn't enjoy science at school, they didn't get excited by it, they didn't think it was a good career. But this research shows that isn't the case. They do enjoy it at school, they do think it's interesting, and they do think it's a good job to go into. But the question that falls down on that last bar, do you want to be a scientist? No. So there's a strange thing going on. They see it as a good thing, they enjoy it, but they don't see it for themselves. They don't think people like me can be a scientist. There's a self-identity problem. So we started to look at why that is happening, and role models are one way to look at that. An organisation in the UK did some research. They're called WISE, Women in Science and Engineering. And they did a study which is worth a look if you're interested, called People Like Me, which tried to explore all of the research around women in science and pull out the main findings. And try to see why, after 20, 30 years of trying to address this, has it not changed? What's going wrong? And some of the key findings were, for girls particularly, we shouldn't focus on what scientists do, and we often talk about what scientists do. We should talk about the type of people scientists are. So that's a slight difference. When we're out in schools, yes, we have to teach what the scientists do, but also tell people what they are like. What are their characters like? Also, not everybody will become a scientist, but there are lots of careers that use science or STEM. So try and shift the message that it's careers that use STEM, not careers in STEM. So that's quite different. You can use your STEM skills in lots of jobs, and that would help as well. This is a really important one, I think. We need to stop phrases like getting girls into science, because it implies that there's something wrong with the girls. Okay? It's not about changing what girls are like, it's about changing what science is like and what employers are like in what they say. Because if you start saying things like getting girls into science, it implies girls are not inherently interested or good at science, which all the research on biological data suggests is not true. So we have to avoid that. And the other thing was found that parents obviously have more influence than we might expect, especially mothers, and that applies to sons or daughters. Actually, mothers' attitudes to careers can make the biggest difference to what students go to do. So out of this study, they developed an activity to take to schools, and it was to do with girls only, so they take it to girl groups only. You can't see this, I apologise, but you can find it online if you want. It was just trying to get girls to analyse their own strengths. So it didn't talk about science specifically. It asked them to say, what kind of person am I? And they did a little quiz like this. I did it for me there. And out of that, the girls got 3 key areas where they were very strong. And the message was, if you want to be happy in your job, and this is something parents are very concerned about, their children are happy in their job. If you want to be happy, match your job to your natural personality strengths. So this was about trying to step away from science for a minute and just talk about what are the girls like and what jobs might match those strengths. And obviously then we would present them some role models that happen to work within a science environment. But the key was, it was the strengths they had that suggested those jobs, not you are a physicist or you're a biologist, it's that you have these sorts of skills. And that seemed to be quite effective. So I did some research with the Open University on this project, which you can look up again. It's called People Like Me. And it said that after this workshop, 57% of the girls were more interested in STEM. So it did seem to at least persuade them that. And those who said they weren't interested at all in STEM dropped from 10% to 4%. So generally it seemed to have a good impact. But that was about girls focusing on their skills, not looking at other people's skills first. Okay? Also, we asked them to use words to describe scientists. One problem often is that people, not just girls, think scientists and engineers are super clever, intelligent. And that is something you're born with or not born with. And that is also not true. So girls and boys need to be aware that hard work and learning skills can actually turn you into a good scientist. You're not born with this skill or not. So what we want to try and do, I think, is move people away from using words like intelligent, clever, brainy when they describe scientists to some other words. In this workshop, interesting came out the most common response. Clever is still there, but at least useful and exciting are in there as well, and creative, which is a nice one to come up. So that was quite effective. So what can go wrong? This campaign, I don't know if anyone has seen it, by the company EDF, which is a French energy company, called Pretty Curious. Now, I might need to explain the translation in terms of that, but the word in the UK in English, the word pretty, obviously can mean pretty, and it can mean slightly, a little bit, okay? So they used this play on words to have young girls in films saying, I'm pretty, and then it would come up curious, and then I'm pretty determined, I'm pretty fascinated, and things like that. Nice idea as a marketing tool, but I think that makes me quite cross, because do you now have to be pretty before you're a scientist and an engineer? So I know we're trying to switch the stereotype mad scientist, old man with big hair, but we don't want to go the wrong way, the other way, and say they're all supermodels either. Because now, not only do you have to be super intelligent, I've got to be a model as well. So I'm not sure about this. I have discussed it with them, and I've agreed to differ, I think. And another one, the Institute for Electrical Technicians, the IET, which is the engineering body in the UK, had a scheme called Portrait of an Engineer. So they got, I think it was 12 engineers, and they had a fashion model come in and do a fashion shoot with them. I mean, look at the pictures, they're so glamorous. And I'm not saying they shouldn't feel they want to dress up and be glamorous, but if this is about role models for children or for girls or even boys, why do we have to show that they're models as well as good engineers? It worries me a little bit. So aren't they just models then? They're not real. So we tried another way. My organisation called Science Made Simple, we're an SME, and we go into schools and we do performances to primary schools and secondary schools and high schools. This show, called Who Wants to Be a Superhero, I'm now wondering whether superhero is a good title, but we'll shelve that for a minute, has a live presenter doing science that they can do in school that relates to their school science, but they introduce 6 real people. I don't know if you can see them here. There are 6 people, 4 are female, 2 are male. We wanted an even balance, but that's just the people we found. And they have jobs, and we introduce them via a short video about their job and why they love their job. So the students get to meet a live scientist who's presenting, and 6 people who talk to them on a camera, on video. And we did this to we've done it to 100 schools across the UK, mainly in Wales, where I come from. And we've asked children which role models they admired and why. And we tried to find out what it was about those role models that appealed to people, and did it change their attitude? So again, this is in the data is in the report if you want to look, but we found that would they like a job in science and engineering before and after the show did increase for both boys and girls. So the show did encourage them to take a job in that area, but the increase was more for the girls. Now, whether that's because they were lower level at the start, or whether it's because there were 4 females featured and 2 males, we're not quite sure. But it did increase more for the girls than the boys. And the negative answers decreased as well. So those that said no also dropped. So that backs up a sort of general positive reaction. Also, we asked them for words to describe scientists, and we monitored what happened to the words before and after the show. And the positive words went up, and the negative words went down. Obviously, positive and negative are a bit subjective, but there's more information about which words we used in the report, if you want to look at that. But generally, there was a slight shift. You can't tell with the size very much, and the numbers are too faint, perhaps. But there was a slight shift that clever, smart, and intelligent did drop a little bit, and helpful and cool came up after the show as common answers. So we were slightly shifting the attitude to what scientists are like and what they do. And they were words that almost described the people rather than the job. So I think that's where it's slightly different. And just one final point. I didn't expect this at all. So the research we did involved 360 written questionnaires, and then we interviewed 32 children who were probably between 9 and 10 years old. Okay, so that's the age group we're talking about. We asked them why people like them might not want a job in science based on what they saw in our show. And a lot of them said, well, it's a dangerous job. And I had never really thought of science as a particularly dangerous job, but I am a scientist, I guess. And I asked them a bit more, why is it dangerous? And they said, well, this is one of our role models. He's a laser physicist, and he builds lasers. And they said, well, the lasers, they might burn him. You know, it's dangerous. And this girl is our civil engineer. She builds bridges. Well, she has a hard hat. The bridge might fall on top of her. And I was just shocked. So we have to consider that when us as scientists are picking jobs to show people that we think are exciting, they might be perceived as dangerous jobs and might actually be putting people off. So that needs more research, I think, but there was something interesting in that we need to think about when we're trying to show people perhaps the best and the greatest of science. So that's worth thinking about. So my final picture, who is your role model? So this was me this weekend with my mum, who turned 80. She's her 80th birthday. And that picture on the right is not me, but it is my daughter, and she is now 7. She was a bit younger then. But my mum, when I was little, used to do this game with me in the bath with a washing up liquid bottle. And we used to squeeze the water out of the bottle and balance a ping pong ball on the jet. And people often ask me, what got you into science? And who knows, there are lots of things. But certainly my mum, playing science games, which I didn't know were science, in the bath, was one of my role models. She was a maths teacher. She told me never to be a teacher because it's such a hard job, so I do appreciate all your work that you're doing. But she was definitely one of my role models. And I think it's because she's real, obviously, and not unattainable. So my message would be, let's think about how we use role models. They can be very effective, but they can also be a little bit dangerous. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot to Wendy Sadler for this very interesting and inspiring speech about gender role models and the real models to be used to foster STEM education and STEM careers.